storm was finally over. For days, the Longship had battled towering waves and freezing winds somewhere in the North Atlantic. Every man aboard had expected the sea to be the greatest danger of the voyage. The ocean could destroy ships, scatter crews, and erase entire expeditions without leaving a trace. Yet as the waters gradually calmed and the sails filled once again, a different threat began to occupy the minds of the sailors. The danger was already aboard. Stored beneath the deck were the barrels that carried one of the most important resources on the entire journey. Without it, no expedition could survive for long. Without it, neither courage nor experience would matter. The barrels contained water. Today, this may sound surprising. When people think about the dangers faced by Vikings, they usually imagine storms, warfare, or the possibility of becoming lost in the vastness of the ocean. Few think about drinking water, yet for much of human history, safe water was one of the most valuable resources a person could possess and one of the easiest to lose. A Viking could survive hunger for days. He could endure freezing temperatures and physical exhaustion. But contaminated water created a different kind of threat. It weakened people slowly. It spread illness through households and settlements. It could turn a successful voyage into a disaster long before an enemy appeared on the horizon. What made this danger especially difficult was that the Vikings had no idea what caused it. They knew nothing about bacteria, viruses, or parasites. They could not test water quality. They could not examine a sample and determine whether it was safe. Instead, they relied on something much older than science: experience. Generation after generation learned which sources could be trusted and which could not. Communities remembered mistakes. Sailors passed practical knowledge to younger crews. Settlers observed which locations produced healthier populations and which created problems. Over time, this accumulated knowledge became one of the hidden foundations of Viking survival. Before the Vikings could cross oceans, establish settlements, or explore distant lands, they first had to solve a far more basic challenge. They needed water that could be trusted. For the Vikings, the search for safe water began long before a ship ever left shore. Whenever people established a new settlement, one question mattered as much as fertile soil, sheltered harbors, or access to trade routes. Could reliable drinking water be found nearby? If the answer was no, every other advantage quickly lost its value. Across Scandinavia, experience taught people where to look. Fast-flowing streams were usually safer than stagnant pools. Springs emerging from underground often provided cleaner and more dependable water than exposed surface sources. Communities with access to these resources enjoyed a major advantage, while those forced to rely on poor sources faced greater risks. This dependence on water-shaped Viking expansion itself. When Norse settlers moved into new territories, they did not simply search for strategic coastlines or productive farmland, they searched for water. In Ireland, settlers moved inland along the River Lee until they found an area that combined favorable geography with dependable freshwater springs. Those springs remained important long after the Viking Age had ended, a reminder of how valuable reliable water had been from the very beginning. Even travel across land reflected this reality. Routes were often planned around places where travelers could replenish their supplies. A journey was not measured only by distance. It was also measured by access to the next dependable source of drinking water. In many cases, knowing where water could be found was just as important as knowing the route itself. For isolated farms, these solutions often worked remarkably well. Surrounded by open land and relatively small populations, many rural communities could maintain access to cleaner water with fewer complications. But success brought growth, and growth created new challenges. As settlements expanded into towns, people began living closer together. Animals occupied the same spaces as humans. Workshops produced waste. Commercial activity intensified. Water sources that had once seemed reliable became increasingly vulnerable to contamination. The Vikings had learned how to find water. Now they faced a much more difficult challenge. They had to keep it safe. The rise of Viking towns transformed many aspects of daily life, including the struggle for safe drinking water. Places such as Jorvik, Dublin, and Hythabu became important centers of trade, craftsmanship, and communication. Merchants arrived from distant regions, goods flowed through crowded streets, workshops operated constantly, wealth accumulated. Yet beneath this success lay a growing environmental problem. The larger a settlement became, the harder it was to protect its water. Waste from people and animals accumulated in greater quantities. Rain carried contaminants into surrounding areas. Water sources that had served smaller populations suddenly faced pressures they had never experienced before. What had once been a simple survival challenge gradually became a complex urban problem. Archaeological evidence reveals how serious these conditions could become. Studies have uncovered signs of parasites and intestinal infections associated with contaminated environments. The dangers were not always obvious, but they were real. A person could drink water that appeared perfectly normal while unknowingly exposing themselves to illness. The Vikings responded in the way they often responded to practical problems. They adapted. In Hythabu, carefully constructed wells reached deeper groundwater and were protected with wooden structures and clay barriers designed to reduce contamination. In Dublin, water management systems helped improve access to cleaner supplies while limiting exposure to polluted runoff. These solutions were not based on scientific theories. They were based on observation and experience. People noticed which approaches worked. They noticed which water sources remained cleaner. They noticed which locations produced fewer problems. Over time, communities refined their methods. This side of Viking society is rarely discussed. Popular images focus on warriors, longships, and distant voyages. Yet none of those achievements would have been possible without countless practical solutions developed by ordinary people. Builders, craftsmen, farmers, and town residents all played a role in solving challenges that affected everyday survival. The Vikings did not conquer the problem completely, but they learned enough to keep growing. And in the process, they discovered another solution that would become an important part of daily life. Sometimes the safest answer was not water at all. To modern audiences, it may seem strange that many Vikings regularly drank beverages other than water. Yet within the conditions of the medieval world, this choice often made perfect sense. The goal was not intoxication. The goal was reliability. One of the most common drinks consumed throughout Viking society was a weak form of beer, often known as small beer. Unlike stronger alcoholic beverages associated with celebrations and feasts, this drink was intended for everyday use. Its importance extended far beyond taste. The brewing process itself offered advantages. Water was heated and combined with grain before fermentation occurred. Although the Vikings possessed no knowledge of microbiology, the process helped create a beverage that was often more dependable than untreated water in environments where contamination posed a constant risk. This made small beer particularly valuable in larger settlements where water quality could be difficult to guarantee. It became part of daily life not because people rejected water, but because experience suggested that fermented beverages could sometimes provide a safer alternative. Other drinks served different purposes. Mead occupied an important place in social and ceremonial life. Stronger ales appeared during gatherings and celebrations. Yet all of these beverages reflected the same underlying reality. Fermentation helped preserve liquids and extend their usefulness. In Iceland and Greenland, another remarkable solution emerged. A fermented whey drink known as blanda became an important source of hydration. Produced from dairy byproducts, it created an acidic environment that limited the growth of many harmful organisms. The result was a drink that could remain usable for long periods, making it especially valuable in regions where resources were scarce and conditions were harsh. What makes these solutions remarkable is their practicality. The Vikings were not following scientific principles they could explain. They were responding to generations of experience. Certain methods produced better results, and those methods survived. The same mindset that helped them build ships, navigate oceans, and establish settlements also helped them solve one of the most basic problems of human existence. But nowhere would these solutions be tested more severely than on the open ocean. For all the challenges faced by Viking settlements, nothing compared to the problem of water at sea. A town could construct a new well, a traveler could seek another spring, a farmer could move livestock away from a water source. A ship crossing the North Atlantic had none of those options. Once land disappeared beyond the horizon, the crew depended entirely on what they had brought with them. Fresh water was stored in wooden barrels secured aboard the ship. At first, this seemed like a simple solution. In reality, it created another problem. Water stored for extended periods gradually deteriorated. It became stale. Its quality declined. What had been fresh at the beginning of a voyage could become increasingly unpleasant weeks later. The Vikings understood this through experience. As a result, they developed practical systems for managing liquids during long journeys. Fresh water was consumed first because it deteriorated most rapidly. Fermented beverages offered more stable alternatives. Supplies such as blanda could remain usable for longer periods and provided valuable reserves during extended voyages. Even these precautions were not always enough. This is one reason why Viking expansion across the North Atlantic often followed a chain of islands and stopping points. Voyages between Scandinavia, the Faroe Islands, Iceland, Greenland, and eventually North America allowed crews to replenish essential supplies whenever opportunities appeared. These stops were not merely convenient. In many cases, they were critical to survival. The Vikings also took advantage of the environment whenever possible. Rainwater could be collected using large woolen sails. After initial runoff removed accumulated salt and debris, additional water could be directed into containers for storage. In an age without modern equipment, even a passing storm could become an opportunity. Viewed from this perspective, the Viking expansion across the Atlantic becomes even more impressive. Their achievements were not simply the result of courage, shipbuilding, or navigation. They depended on solving countless practical problems that threatened survival every day. Before the Vikings reached Iceland, Greenland, or the distant shores of North America, they first had to overcome a challenge far less famous than any battle or conquest. They had to learn how to survive in a world where even water could not always be trusted. And in many ways, that hidden struggle was one of their greatest achievements.